It's February 17th, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And picture this. You're coming in for a landing on a Delta flight. You just came from Minneapolis.
Okay.
The weather's been pretty rough all weekend.
Yeah.
And suddenly, instead of a smooth touchdown, you're in a plane that's flipped upside down on the runway.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, everybody on board the Bombardier CRJ-900 survived.
Yeah, that's good news at least.
That's about 80 passengers and crew.
Right.
But I think it's safe to say things did not go according to plan.
Definitely not. I mean, it's a pretty stark reminder that, even with all the safety measures we have in aviation, incidents can still happen.
Right.
And this one's especially interesting just given the apparent lack of like a clear-cut cause,
Yeah.
We've got a bit of a puzzle to piece together here.
Yeah, definitely a puzzle. And the initial reports, they mentioned some injuries, but the exact number is still a little unclear.
Right.
Some say at least 18 people had to go to the hospital.
Oh,
While others are reporting 8 injuries with 1 person in critical condition.
wow.
But regardless of what the final tally is, the impact on the airport itself was undeniable.
Oh, absolutely. Toronto Pearson had to completely shut down arrivals and departures for over 2 hours.
Okay.
So think about that.
Oh, yeah.
The domino effect, all those delays cascading through the system flights diverted, thousands of passengers stranded.
Yeah.
It really highlights how interconnected air travel is.
It does. And the fact that Peel Regional Police had to get called in along with air safety investigators shows just how seriously everyone was taking this.
Yeah, makes sense.
But let's get to the heart of the matter here. What could have caused this plane to flip like that?
Well, the investigation is still ongoing.
Okay.
The Transportation Safety Board of Canada is leading it with some help from the FAA. But there are definitely a few factors that are worth looking into.
Right.
First off, the weather in Toronto that weekend was pretty intense.
Yeah.
High winds and almost 9 inches of snow.
I was reading about that, and I saw that some people on social media, even a few experts, are saying that crosswinds might have been a major contributor.
Yeah, it's possible.
Especially if the runway was covered in snow.
Yeah, you have to think about it.
How do pilots even land in those conditions?
It's almost like trying to steer a car on like a slick, icy road with gusts of wind pushing you sideways.
Oh, yeah.
But with much higher stakes, obviously.
Right.
Crosswinds can create a lot of sideways force on the aircraft during landing, so it makes it tricky to maintain control.
Yeah, I can imagine. But the Bombardier CRJ-900 is designed to handle crosswinds up to 35 knots.
That's true.
And reports say the winds at the time were only around 23 to 24 knots. So were the winds alone really enough to cause this?
That is the big question.
Yeah.
And even if the winds were within the aircraft's limits, you have to think about that snow-covered runway.
Right.
That could have made the tires lose traction very easily.
It's like trying to brake on an ice rink.
Exactly. So we really need to consider that the runway itself might have played a role here.
It sounds like a perfect storm of factors might have been involved.
Could be.
But there's another piece of this puzzle that I found really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
Some reports are suggesting that there might have been an issue with something called a flap actuator.
Oh, right, the flap actuator.
What exactly is that?
So a flap actuator is a super important component.
Okay.
It controls the flaps on the wings.
Oh.
Those are the movable sections that you see extending during takeoff and landing.
Right.
They're essential for generating extra lift at low speeds.
So if this flap actuator wasn't working properly, would that have made it harder to land safely?
Yeah, potentially. It would be like trying to land a bird with clipped wings.
Oh.
The plane would have to come in faster
Yeah.
and with a lot less control.
Right.
And that would make it way more vulnerable to any bad conditions like those crosswinds and the slippery runway we were talking about.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
makes you think about how important those flaps really are for a smooth landing.
Yeah, they give the plane that extra little bit of lift to stay airborne at those lower speeds, which is obviously crucial when you're trying to touch down gently. But you said a flap actuator failure might have been involved.
Yeah.
How common are those? Because if they're super rare, why are we even talking about this?
That's a really good question, and it kind of gets to the core of how we investigate aviation safety.
Okay.
Flap actuator failures are not something you see every day,
Right.
but they are serious enough that we have to look at them closely whenever a landing doesn't go right. You see, modern aircraft have these redundant systems,
Okay.
backups upon backups, but even those can fail in very, very rare circumstances.
It's like having a spare tire in your car.
Exactly. In the case of flap actuators, you often have 2 or more. Each one can control the flaps independently.
Okay.
So if one fails, the other one can take over.
Okay, so it's like a safety net for your safety net.
Exactly.
That's reassuring. But you're saying these failures can still happen.
Right.
So what could actually cause a flap actuator to malfunction?
Well, there are a few possibilities.
Okay.
It could be something mechanical, like a part wearing out, a hydraulic leak, or a faulty sensor.
Right.
Or, and this is where the weather comes in,
Right.
extreme cold can sometimes mess with how well the actuator works.
Oh, wow.
It's like how your car door hinges get all stiff on a really cold morning.
Yeah.
Similar thing can happen to parts on the plane, especially when it's freezing and there's heavy snow, like what Toronto had that weekend.
So the cold weather could have stressed the flap actuator and made it more likely to fail.
That's definitely something investigators will be looking into, and of course there's always the possibility of human error.
Right.
Maybe a maintenance issue wasn't caught during a routine check. But just to be clear, we're just speculating here based on what we know so far.
Yeah.
The official investigation will give us a more definite answer.
It's like we're putting a giant jigsaw puzzle together and we only have a few pieces right now.
Exactly.
But let's talk about the bigger picture here. How do airlines and regulators try to prevent these kinds of failures in the first place?
Well, it starts with really strict manufacturing standards.
Right.
Flap actuators, just like all those critical aircraft parts, they have to be built to super high specifications.
Right.
And they go through a ton of testing to make sure they can handle extreme conditions and that they have multiple safeguards built in.
So a lot of emphasis on making sure they're built tough from the start.
Exactly. But what about ongoing maintenance? How often do they get checked?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Maintenance is absolutely crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Airlines have these super detailed maintenance schedules.
Okay.
They tell you exactly what needs to be inspected and how often based on how many hours the plane has flown, how old the part is, and even the environment it's been in.
Wow.
It's like a super detailed car tune-up, but on a much bigger scale.
Right.
Mechanics will look at the flap actuators for anywhere
Mm-hmm.
and tear check fluid levels, run tests, the whole 9 yards.
It's like taking your plane to the doctor for a checkup.
Exactly. But even with all these precautions, things can still fall through the cracks.
So no system is perfect.
Unfortunately not, and human error is always a possibility, but that's why these incident investigations are so important.
Right.
They help us learn from every little mishap, find areas where we can improve and make those safety protocols even tighter to make flying safer.
It's like they're constantly refining the recipe, tweaking the ingredients to get the safest possible outcome.
That's a great way to put it. Every incident, big or small, gives us valuable data.
Right.
Investigators look at everything, the weather, the maintenance logs, what the pilot did to figure out what contributed to the incident, and if there are any patterns popping up across different incidents.
So it's like forensic science for airplanes.
Exactly. They're looking for clues to prevent the same thing from happening again, and what they find can lead to changes in how they do maintenance, how they train pilots,
Sure.
even how they design planes in the future.
So even though what happened at Toronto Pearson was scary, it could actually help make flying safer for everyone in the long run.
That's the hope, to constantly learn and improve. We've come a long way in aviation safety, but there's always room to do better.
We've gone through a lot with this incident, huh? Snowy runways, those crazy crosswinds, and then all that stuff about flap actuators and backup systems.
Yeah, we have.
If you had to sum it up, what's the one big takeaway that really sticks with you?
You know, for me, it's the fact that aviation safety isn't about just one thing.
Right.
It's not just about having well-maintained planes or skilled pilots.
Yeah.
It's really about the whole system working together.
Right.
Understanding that even little things like a small change in temperature or a shift in the wind can combine in ways you wouldn't expect and create a really risky situation.
It's like that saying, for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost.
Exactly.
But here it's more like, for want of a working flap actuator, a plane flipped over.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And what makes this Toronto incident so interesting is that it shows how the weather, the runway conditions, and those potential mechanical issues might have all played a role together. Those 23, 24 knot crosswinds, even though they were within what the CRJ 900 can handle, could have been a much bigger problem because of that slick runway and the possible loss of lift from the flap actuator.
Yeah, like a chain reaction.
Exactly.
Where every link leads to the final outcome.
Yeah.
But this isn't just about figuring out what went wrong in this one case, right?
No, not at all.
It's about using what we learn to prevent it from happening again.
Absolutely. This incident shows that we need to keep pushing the boundaries of aviation safety.
Okay.
We have to keep investing in research and development, not just for fancy new technology on the planes, but also for things like better weather forecasting, more advanced systems to monitor the runways, and even more training for the pilots.
So we're not just reacting to what's already happened. We're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly, and analyzing data is going to be huge for that.
Right.
We can collect so much information from flights now, everything from the weather and air traffic control to the plane's maintenance logs and how the pilot is performing.
Wow.
And by finding patterns and trends in all that data, we can spot potential risks before they even become a problem.
So it's like a crystal ball for aviation safety.
Haha. Yeah, something like that. But instead of magic, it's powered by algorithms and data analysis.
Right. And with AI and machine learning getting better all the time, we're only going to get better at this kind of prediction.
Definitely. It has the potential to completely change how we approach safety in aviation by letting us make proactive decisions instead of reactive ones.
So even though this incident was scary for everyone on that plane, it could actually lead to a safer flying experience for everyone in the future.
That's the hope. By learning from every single incident and constantly improving the technology and protocols, we can work towards making flying as safe as possible.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot today exploring all the different angles of this complex incident at Toronto Pearson.
We'll have.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
We talked about the weather, the runway, the mechanics of the plane, but let's not forget about the people. The pilots, who had to make decisions in a split second under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
The passengers who went through something terrifying, their stories, are a crucial part of this too.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that behind all the data and technology, there are real people whose lives are affected by these events.
Yeah, good reminder.
So the next time you're on a plane, take a second to think about all the things that have to come together to get you to your destination safely, and all the people who are working hard to make sure you arrive safe and sound.
Well said. It's easy to focus on the technical stuff, but at the end of the day, aviation is about people, and that's what drives us to keep making things better and safer for everyone.